Nancy, I've shared with you recently about my own personal situation with my wife. She was diagnosed a little over a year ago with early onset Alzheimer's, and while she's still competent today, we have taken the my own advice and gone out and had our estate planning documents updated and had our healthcare directives and financial powers of attorney updated to reflect the new reality that we live with. And that reality is that over the next years, I'm going to become 100% responsible for the decisions that need to be made for my wife's welfare, both financial, her living arrangements, as well as her healthcare decisions. And so, what I've been able to do is to go to the doctor with my wife, to have conversations on the phone with her physician and with the physician's assistants about what's going on. Because one of the limitations she has now is she has a form of speech aphasia that's common with Alzheimer's, and she has difficulty speaking what her thoughts are. And so, in the absence of these documents, it would be really hard to negotiate all the kind of new things that come up, because when you get a diagnosis, you know a little bit about it. But what you really learn about the diagnosis is as you live with it, and you see how almost every week I realize there's one more thing that I need to be aware of. There's one more thing that I need to think about, or that I need to take care of. And I don't want anybody to feel sorry for me. I'm happy to be married to the woman that I love. But
Awesome.
what I really want is for people to understand that there's good ways and there's not so good ways of having to live this. And I feel fortunate to have had enough knowledge and have acted soon enough that in a lot of ways this isn't as hard as it could be. Can you talk to me a little bit about that and your own experience and what you recommend with people that are either facing this or just people that are smart enough to plan way ahead for these
Certainly,
things?
yes. We do a lot of this planning now as America is aging. And my practice, the focus of my practice has shifted because of the federal estate tax exclusion going up significantly from tax planning to elder care planning. And many times, several times a week, we get telephone calls from people where the house is on fire.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean by that.
Yeah, I do.
There's a diagnosis.
Right.
And more often than not, planning has not been done.
Right.
And the focus on whether it's the spouse or it's a child of a surviving parent, usually the focus is how can we keep from having to spend our parents' hard-earned savings on nursing home care.
Right.
So there's that's difficult to deal with once the house is on fire and there's been a diagnosis. And that's where professionals like you come in years before and, talk to people about long-term care insurance and its value.
Right.
But certainly if once we address the financial issues that family is facing, for example, I met with a lady a few weeks ago, and God love her, her husband, she was caring for him at home, and he had Alzheimer's. And she thought that she was going to have to sell her house and spend money, the proceeds of the house, on his care when it came down to that.
Fortunately, that's not the case.
And that's not the case.
She didn't know it.
She didn't know
full
it.
Of fear.
She's full of fear, so frightened. And I could just see the joy return to her face when I said, you don't have to leave your home. In fact, you can buy a bigger home if you want to.
Right.
Your home is protected, So there are certainly financial aspects to counseling people who are facing a long-term care situation, but then the legal documents that are involved. And this can be gut-wrenching counseling for me because often I am telling the couple, especially if it's a couple,
right,
that let's say the husband, I'm not picking on men, but let's say the husband has been diagnosed,
Right.
and it's a heterosexual couple. The husband's been diagnosed
Hmm.
with Alzheimer's, and I'm telling the wife that she needs to change her legal documents to eliminate him as her fiduciary.
Right.
That and of course that's a hard um,
It's
um,
emotional. Yeah.
concept for her to. She's relied on him. They've been a team all their lives, and suddenly she's not to name him in her documents anymore.
Right.
But the reality is that the disease is going to progress, so that he's not going to be able to serve as her agent, her
Hmm.
healthcare agent, or her financial agent, or probably will not survive her to serve as executor of her estate. So we will change the well spouse's documents to reflect that reality. And then typically we will even change the documents so that the diagnosed spouse is not even a beneficiary anymore.
Right.
And of course, that's another layer of devastation.
Right.
What do you mean I'm not giving my estate to my husband or my wife? But if the disease is so catastrophic that it takes years of nursing home care, especially if there's not nursing home insurance,
Right.
and the money has to be spent down, at that point the couple may want to do Medicaid planning,
Right.
and the well spouse does not want to give what estate he or she does have to the diagnosed spouse only to be spent down on nursing home care.
Sure.
So certainly we will update then the documents of the one who's been diagnosed to make sure that there are sufficient fiduciaries. And in the documents that we write in our office, we list first, second, and third choices,
Right.
because you never know when someone might get sick or not be willing to serve.
Right.
Certainly, we can name co-fiduciaries if that's appropriate. But those are some of the things that we do. We also make sure that there are funeral plans in place.
Right.
That can be a contested issue among families now, especially blended families.
Yeah.
And because cremation is becoming more popular because it's so much more economical, we need to have that right of disposition of remains form in place so that the appropriate people can consent to the cremation when the time comes. Because if that document is not in place, the protocol of the funeral homes in Miami Valley is that they require the consent of the next of kin
Right.
for cremation. So there are a lot of issues there that we address, but
Right.
it's certainly a very different type of planning than for a single person who is well, or two partners in a relationship, a marriage, who
Full
are well.
partnership where both of
Yes.
them can participate
Hmm.
in.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nancy.
You're welcome.